Okay. And then if anybody joins later, they'll just join in the middle of your presentation. So, anyways, so hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our special case study presentation. Um, Please allow me to introduce our guest speaker, Patrick, or I'm sorry, Matrick, Matt Ransom, who currently serves as the Digital Preservation and Access Manager at Appalachian State University, which is located in Boone, North Carolina. Matt will be presenting a case study on how he built the digital stewardship program at Appalachian State, and then we'll be available to take your questions. So take it away, Matt.
Okay. Say a few things about my background. I came into digital preservation via audiovisual archives. And this is a second career for me. I'm still an active professional musician as well, and still playing a couple of orchestras. But I ended up, through my audiovisual archives background, moving over into digital preservation. And when I first got here to App State, there was not any kind of digital preservation program in place at all. So I basically started from scratch. So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can get my slides. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. The title of this, I did this presentation, will be a little different this time, but originally a few years ago, and Local Rules Apply was a title that I really thought was applicable to this, because every institution has its own local limitations, and every situation has its own intrinsic problems. So, you know, you're coming into all different types of situations. Sometimes national standards aren't always the easiest thing to implement because of local issues. And so that's where that comes from. So my institution is a mid-sized state university with a student population of about 22,000 students. And we are not exactly a high budget institution. We're sort of in the middle area there. And so I didn't come in with a lot of money to deal with. I had to plan it. I had to see what the problems were. I had to see how we could fix it. And I had to see what it would take to fix it, and garner help from those around me the best I could to implement a preservation program. And you know, there are bumps in the roads, there are moguls all over the place. And, you know, money is always an issue. And I'm going to expound on this a little bit more later. But just up front, I'm going to go ahead and say that in my 10 years here at App State, I've had 4 deans. And that is something that I think is rampant around these days. So I am navigating that administrative water all the time with the amount of interest from my own dean. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So the environment I started with here at App was basically no digital preservation whatsoever. We had content dating back to 2004, at least as far as I could tell at the time. And we had it stored on a couple of different servers in multiple volumes, and there were old servers, one of which was scheduled to be shut down when I took this over. There were various backups in different places. There were actual CDs and DVDs and hard drives laying around. There were computers with built-in hard drives that had to be scavenged. And so, you know, to do this was a pretty big job. And we also deal with university archives. So we had to deal with some various departments across campus as well to make sure we knew what they had on their own machines and storage areas as well. The team that I work on is called the Digital Scholarship and Initiatives team. And our team is a spinoff from Special Collections and University Archives. We oversee all the digitization. As a matter of fact, my job is to oversee another staff member and a phalanx of student assistants who run all of our digitization program here as well. So that's tied in directly with our preservation program. I oversee both of those things. So that new team actually started to form just after I started looking into this. And that was advantageous for numerous reasons. The main one being I had a new coordinator of digital projects who coordinates our team, who is specifically interested in digital preservation. She knew the importance of it. We had goals. My biggest goal was to get everything in the right places, and then start looking toward working toward recognized standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but trust is a very large thing for digital preservation. If we want to be service forward the way we should be and help our constituents save their content, they need to be able to trust us to do it. And that was my biggest thing, was to be able to instill trust in people so they would bring it to us once we got everything settled in. And as you probably all know, 16363 is the end game for that. And there's a lot that goes into that. Are we there as a trusted repository at this point? No, we're not there. We're working toward it still, but there are lots of things within that ISO that have to do with issues outside of the library, as far as IT security and other things like that. So our goals were to standardize our processing with OAIS and try to come up with a coherent file system that was consistent with special collections and university archives upstairs, and make sure we could secure the content safely. Ideally 3 on and off-site storage areas and other multiple backup resources. I'll talk a little bit more about where we are now as opposed to back then in just a little bit. So I'll get back to this just a little bit, but this was the goal in the beginning. The content that we deal with, because of the nature of where I work and the region we're in, there is a large historical grounding in folk and bluegrass music. And one of our largest collections here is the Appalachian collection. And I'd say about 50 to 60% of that collection is audiovisual. And it's huge and it's growing every year. To give you an idea, we just took in a collection that's going to be ongoing for the Merle Fest, which is the largest folk festival in the Southeast every year. And we're getting that on a hard drive every year or in digital ingest. And we had 2,400 physical items to digitize as well. So that kind of stuff comes to us on a fairly regular basis. So we're creating lots of content, taking up lots of bandwidth constantly. We also do video, anything from film up. We try to do everything in-house as best we can. There's a few things we can't, but for the most part, we try. I do a lot of repairing of things around here too. There's old machines. We do a lot of imaging, a lot of rare book scanning, just anything you can imagine in special collections or university archives, we're doing it. I'm seeing a real growth in born digital content the past few years, and it is coming fast and hard. Just took in a collection from a local radio station recently that, was 21 terabytes. So, it comes in, and dealing with that on a large scale is something that we have to work with all the time. But that's the basic, overview of the in-library stuff. We also work directly with faculty and staff and students on research data. And we do some visualization as well on campus here in the library. And so I store research data of all different types. And we also have sources of content from across the region. And I'll talk a little bit more about partners in just a minute. But that's an overview of the kind of files that we're dealing with. So before we move forward, I just want to tell you basically about storage, because this is a question I get quite often when I do more localized presentations. Everybody wants to know about storage. So I'm going to go ahead and give that up front. It might make a little bit more sense going forward too. We just acquired a new Linux Synology server. I'm already at 70% in about a year on it. I have a budget presentation on Monday for a module, expansion module already. So, that's run by our campus ITS. So I work directly with the Linux administrator for any maintenance involved with that. And I am the only person in the library with access to this server, except for the staging folder that's on it. So we keep it as secure as possible all the time. And on that server, it's a large local file directory system that goes along with the collections that we have. So each collection is delineated individually. And there's a separate staging area for everything that we do. Nothing ever goes directly into preservation storage. The staging area is where we save all of digitization and where the primary ingest point is for our Bourne digital materials. After it's been virus checked, of course. But this is where I decide if it's short, mid, or long-term preservation and where it needs to go in my preservation system. We do a lot of short-term projects that don't need to be kept for a long time. And some of those hardly ever even move off of the staging server. We create the access copies that need to be made and then they disappear for the project and it's gone. We do have Omeka as our online access point. So we have 3 different instances of Omeka for different things. We have an Omeka S instance for large projects. We also have a faculty Omeka instance for faculty projects and a special collections instance as well. And for storage for Amazon S3 and Glacier, we have both of those in various percentages. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Amazon in just a minute. It's very interesting, especially in regards to Archivematica. So the S3 is used for just short-term, put it there, and you can mess with it, play with it, do what you need to with it. But anything that's dark archive goes into Glacier. And that is basically fail-safe, and that is mirrored in a separate place. I think it's Newark, New Jersey, and Ohio storage for that. So if one of those gets blown up by a missile, the other one's still there, and we still have it. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And we do use other cloud storage. I use Google Drive to store mainly access copies, and I can deliver those to patrons as well via Google Drive by just sharing them. I do a lot of work with special collections reference upstairs when we get their reference requests for digitization or Bourne digital items. I work with them through Google Drive and I share it with them, and then they take ownership of it and they share it with the patrons as well. And I can do that with faculty directly for their projects too. Just a little bit about legacy data. When I was looking at everything that we had to deal with, we had it all over the place. And I think I mentioned scraping off even all hard drives, computers that were sitting in corners. I had to make sure that we didn't miss anything. But after we did all of that, there had to be a large cleanup, what I call a sweep of everything about duplication and archival material and what is not archival material. And that's something I worked with our university archivists on. That was a long process to figure out what is material that needs to be preserved. In a perfect world, we'd save everything, but we can't. We don't have the bandwidth and we don't have the time. So we had to go through all of that stuff. And that's a process that needs to be worked out with the owners of that data. You run across a faculty project, you just can't destroy it. You can't just delete it, even though you don't see a need for it. You have to ask who that person was, find out, contact them, and see what's going on with that. If they need it delivered somewhere else, maybe you can just give it off to them. Then after that, we had to clean and standardize any existing metadata and create more because most of it had no metadata. I've been creating and updating metadata just about every day of my career here. There's so many collections that were done before I arrived that didn't have any metadata at all. And that's something that can really bog you down. There's a lot that has to be done. And thank goodness we have a good student assistant budget as well. They've been very helpful with that. We can create copies of collections, put them on a desktop, and let them create a spreadsheet for us. That's been very useful too. Why do we have to do all this? I mentioned before, you don't want to save stuff you don't need to. Because storage is money, it costs money. And also time. It's just myself, one other full-time staff member, and I have a semi-sizable team of students. And we have some ongoing projects to keep the students busy as well. So it's mainly my full-time employee and I deciding how these things move forward. So time and money are the two rarest things around here for us. So we have to pick and choose what our projects are and how we do it, just to get things finished. I don't like having projects laying out there open for a long time. So as our movement toward 16363 and OAS, I tested a lot of tools. And I don't know if you've checked out the tool grid on the Digital POWRR site. Lots of good stuff there. Not quite sure how updated it is right now, but there's lots of good tools popping up all this time. There's two approaches you can take to this. You can try to do something like Preservica or Archivematica, which will do everything for you, automated, basically. Or you can come up with a set of your own tools to do what you need to do. There are even there are ways to do separate tools from your desktop if you have a place to drop your stuff in storage. So, cost is obviously a biggest thing. Preservica is expensive. Archivematica is too, if you have it hosted. It is open source. And what we tried to do, what was it, 6 years ago now, we instituted Archivematica here with systems analyst who installed it for me on a localized library server. And we ran that for a couple of years, and I will say on and off because it breaks all the time. And, using our IT guys' time is also using money and taking resources away from other things that we're running. So if an open source application takes a lot of work and a lot of time, if you price in time with your budget, you might see it might not be the best choice. For us, it worked for a while, and it just became a little bit too much of a mechanical problem. Fortunately, I got everything processed through it. And when I got most of that stuff processed through the pre-existing collections, I just let it go for a while. And I bided my time a little bit. And at the end of this, I'll tell you about where I am currently. But I also use the digital preservation recorder from Archives of Australia. That's a great tool. That's no longer supported though, but it still works and it's still OAS compliant. And I've messed with a lot of other desktop tools. I use Data Accessioner now as well from Duke. I use a lot of the bit curator tools as well. I know most of the guys that created that stuff. So if I have trouble with that, I can just call them. It's kind of nice. But the purpose for me for Archivematica was to have a consolidated approach. It was a system, so I didn't have to have multiple people touching anything. So I could just run something through the system and have it come out the other side the way I wanted it, assuming it was prepared properly. And there are a lot of steps for prepping stuff for Archivematica. That's actually the most time-consuming part of it, is preparing the submission package. And what you do get out of it is the METS file with your Primus and your Dublin core if you want it. And that is something where you don't have to look at the collection. You can just print out the METS file and you've got everything that's in there that you need to know. You do have to have direct storage and access pipelines for that. And that means working with campus IT as well, which I'll get into a little bit more later. We had a big switcheroony here at App a few years ago. And the other considerations for this when we installed it was, 10 years down the road, are we going to have enough storage? How are we going to be running this thing? And is it still going to be supported? That's one of the good things about the METS file. It's also machine readable. So if you need to transfer stuff into something else, you can. There are access options that also are compatible with Archivematica. I believe DSpace is and A2M is as well, which is also an artifactual product for online access projects. And then, you know, the question at the bottom, open source versus money. Archivematica hosted is not cheap. I'm not sure of an exact figure right now. I'm about to find out though. I am in budget negotiations with AWS to run Archivematica within our AWS cloud using Glacier and S3, and it's complicated. The pricing is extremely complicated. Archivematica has a function for retrieval that does not work in Glacier because it's Glacier. You're not supposed to be able to grab something easily out of there. If you grab something out of there, you have to pay to see it. So S3, which is much more expensive than Glacier, is the way you have to run the front of that. So the pricing has become a problem. And that's what I'm working on with AWS right now. They're fairly flexible, even with the pricing. So they want to get this kind of stuff rolling, and they're dealing with a few people like me who want to use it, trying to figure out how, you know, the cost structure is going to be with the storage. So I guess stay tuned on that one if you have questions about it. The other thing we did creating the preservation system was creating a policy, a digital preservation policy. I think I was writing one when I did this first presentation a few years ago, and that one next now has been taken off the shelf and we're redoing it right now. I think it's still on the digital power site somewhere. Anyway, I just want to touch a few bases on when you create it. I always think that a policy seems so administrative sometimes. It's just an administrative regurgitation of what is here in the department or on the campus, right? And for us, within the library, our digital preservation policy works under the auspices of my team, which is Digital Scholarship and Initiatives. And we're a service team. We serve the campus, we serve the community. So for me, I wanted to be very service forward. I know I put that last on the thing, but and just by doing that, if you look back up at the top, you know, you need to say who you are, including the people and what they do. And what we do as a unit. Digital preservation policy also includes, the new one anyway, will also include our digitization complex here, with our AV lab, our textual document scanning lab, our imaging lab. All of that stuff is going to be under this policy. And you know, we'll have FADGI standards, we'll have our localized audiovisual standards, we'll have, you know, the way to submit things, all of that in the proper formats, and the things we can offer via access as well. So, and on a project basis for faculty or whoever needs help. And, you know, and how we do it, there needs to be an explanation of what we do, the tools that we use, you know, the standards that we do work to. Just as a general rule of thumb, these are like the basic fundamentals, I think, of the policy. I've written policies previously with some administrators, and it's really hard to do because they're more numbers oriented and I'm more standards oriented. So I try to work with both of those different approaches. So we have something that's readable by the general public and understandable. It doesn't just sound like a legal document, which can happen sometimes. So a little bit more about where we were going with our program, and to expand on that policy a little bit. We serve the library, we serve the university, we serve the community, and by the community I mean the town of Boone and the county of Watauga, which is the county that we're in, the region. And we have a major here called Appalachian Studies. It's underneath the history department, and our Appalachian collection is very active because of that. And there are numerous institutions within our region, from Florida to Ohio, who have app studies programs of some way, shape, or form. And we work a lot within our region with other institutions with that content as well, in partnership with them a lot. And with the state itself, you know, we're a state institution. So we work under the rules and regulations of the UNC institution. Like we have our UNC retention and disposition schedule for university archives. I work directly with that. I meet with them occasionally when they rewrite things in that policy for the entire all the institutions in the system. So we are bound to that. So we actually help each other a lot in regards to those regulations, because we all have to be on the same level with those. We also work a little bit with state archives. We don't work under the same rules as they do, but we try to work together, and especially lately, digital policies. And recently, the state archives has worked with the state on creating better policies for what are digital records and how they should be handled across the state. And that trickles down to the UNC system as well. National international access is just making our content known and available to anybody that wants it. And, we can preserve everything we want to. If people don't know we have it, we don't know where it is or how to find it, our job is meaningless. So we need to make sure access is, an equal priority to preservation, actually. We can preserve everything we want to, but to have it found, discovered, and actually to understand it, to know how it's used, know what the provenance of it is, and know what the legal rights are to that content, extremely important. And on my team, fortunately, we have a scholarly communications librarian that has a Juris Doctor. So she's very helpful with me on lots of things. Our campus legal team says no to everything. It's just a thing. But she's very helpful in working around some of those problems. All right, so some partners that we work with closely within the library itself, not outside, not out on the rest of the campus, but just within the library. Some people that I have found to be some of my best friends in this building to help get things done. We actually have a business systems analyst on my team, and he is an IT banded staff person. And he has a pretty good history in repository administration and maintenance. He takes care of all our Omeka issues and some of our web apps. So when somebody says something's down, we have somebody on my team that hopefully can jump on it pretty quickly. And if he can't do it, he has a direct line to campus IT to help him out. So that's a great person to have on a team, or at least within the library that you can go to help do that immediately, because when people see problems, people freak out. So, you need to make sure that you have somebody to go to when specific things happen. We have a web librarian in the building as well, which is great. We have a pretty layered online presence here underneath the Drupal platform of the university. I actually have done a lot of data visualization through Drupal, making websites for helping students, grad students, faculty make websites to access their content. And she's always very helpful with that. Just a person to really keep on your Christmas list, because they come in very handy. We have a library technology team in the building, and they handle all the equipment needs. I actually have budget requests that are handled for digitization equipment, like reel-to-reel decks. If I need a new one, if I need a U-matic machine, that actually goes to our library tech budget, not through my team budget. And so we have a larger budget allocation that the coordinator of that team divvies up the way he sees fit as requests come in. So that's a really nice way to have it work out, because it doesn't go through my team budget at all. It's an overall library tech budget. It's a good design, actually, for budgeting for equipment. I do have occasional, especially end of the year money, occasionally for specific equipment for us as well, that they just give us the money and we can buy it. So that works a little bit different that way. But it's good to know how those things work. So if you need some equipment, you know where to go to get it. Now I'll tell you a little bit about our partners across the university now. You also see up at University ITS here, We used to have, our library technology team used to also handle all of our server administration too. That has changed. Our servers moved out of the building and they are in a server farm, not even on campus anymore. They're about 2 miles away from here. So I deal directly with campus ITS Linux administrators for that. So I do a lot of communication outside the building. And I'm very lucky that they're very inclusive and very understanding of what the needs are. They're also working on the Archivematica install via AWS. We're in the POC right now, the point of conception of that and working on it, and it's up and running beautifully. We have to work out some cost problems with storage, as I mentioned, but I'm working directly with them on that. I'm the only contact in the library for that. And just a little bit of an aside, my position actually is an IT position as well. I'm banded IT, and it's really great because I deal with IT people all the time and they see me as IT as well, which is very helpful with communication. This was a long discussion a long time ago when I was promoted, and it's turned out very well. As you see there, they handle, ITS handles all our cloud storage as well. I mean, I have access to our AWS to dump things in, and I have access to all our server stuff. They do weekly backups for us. So on the servers, I can't lose more than a week of work right now. Our Chief Information Security Officer is a very cool guy, and he has been very helpful to us, especially in regards to university archives, because as the Chief Information Security Officer, he is also responsible for all of our university archives digital content. I don't know if everybody realizes that, but especially when you might need some funding for more storage or whatever, we're storing their data that has to be secure. So he's another resource to go to bat for you at a very high administrative level to get some funding for applications or for storage. Just keep that in mind. A little bit more about outreach. We try to, and this sort of points toward letting people know what we have, what our content is, and who our patrons actually are, what our target audience is. Our special collections is very targeted. We have the Appalachian collection, we have a stock car collection, we have a rare book collection. We have numerous other smaller collections, but those are the biggest ones that we have. And I don't know what you guys know about stock car or NASCAR, but it's pretty big down in the Southeast. So we have, some of the collections are pretty active. So we partner up quite a bit. Digital Watauga is a historical organization actually that is doing digitization of historical documents of the county of Watauga, which includes Boone, the history of the area. We have lots of other societies around. We have Blowing Rock Historical Society, which is literally 10 miles down the road. Lincoln Heights Recreation Corporation, which is a long and storied history of African-American education in this area. We have an Indian population here as well. That's another underserved population that we are doing some collections in conjunction with them. And we also have a community college system here that we also do some Southern Appalachia work with. They all have their own, very small, but some archival section in their libraries where they do some work, and we help them out a lot with digitization needs. We also have the Watauga County Public Libraries, which is where Digital Watauga is based. And we have the most resources in the area, so we want to make sure they know what we have and that we can partner with them. And we do it via grant funded projects. We do it just to help them out. We do it to be friendly. So it helps us and it helps them. It's a mutual arrangement, and we're always trying to reach out. The coordinator of my team is very service oriented, and she is very active in promoting projects and bringing new projects in and partnerships. The reason we do it, to educate people about preservation I've done a few local presentations on personal preservation for people as well at the public libraries. That's always appreciated and needed. People have lots of personal documents of all types that, are really good to know what to do with those things and to safely preserve them, not just take a picture on your phone. And how, some of the content is going to be managed. How we manage our content is also helpful to them, so they can understand how to manage theirs as well. So my team, as I mentioned before, I should have put a link to our team site. Our library website is pretty easy to navigate. You can find us pretty easily. We have a fairly layered website. Some would say it might be too much information, but who knows? But it gives you an idea of the people we have and the jobs that we do. We also have plenty of challenges, funding and resources being the biggest one. In the UNC system, our funding, the campus funding is based almost exclusively on enrollment, increasing enrollment. We have a lot of campuses in our system having trouble with that right now, and they're letting people go because it's just the way it is. Right now, App is doing great, fortunately. When I came here 10 years ago, we had 14,000 students, and now we have almost 23,000. That's 10 years. So that's pretty good. So we're doing okay. But for larger projects, things that pop up, we don't always have the funds allocated to our team. We have to fight for funds in the library. So, we're always quantifying everything that we're doing, keeping track of all of our stats. We have to show why we need the resources we're asking for. So stats are a huge thing. I'm always doing stats. We do them weekly and monthly and quarterly and fiscal yearly as well. So they're always asked for the end of year reports too. And if you're showing big numbers and, the use stats are good and the preservation stats are high, you're more likely to get more money. So make sure you keep track of every single thing that you do. Education, and that's for employees, for people that work for us that are here, and for myself too, my ongoing education. Things change all the time. There's new applications, new things popping up. These are tech jobs to a very large extent. So we have to keep up on everything. So funding for that as well, and for our students, and for, my full-time employee working for me as well. So we try to get funding for that. And it's challenging to find the time to do these things as well, because there's a balance of ongoing education, continuing education, and doing your job, So finding time for that. We're not allowed to do overtime. We get screamed at if we put in 40.5 hours a week, So it's just one of those things. It's one of the problems of not having a faculty position for this job is that, they're expected to just do their job. Our professional staff positions are a little bit more time limited, so we have to be a little more careful. As I mentioned before, trust. Funding in particular with your administration, they need to trust that you're, going to own the content, you're going to manage it properly, and you're going to be working toward what your constituents and your patrons need. They need to trust that you're going to do that. And when you ask for funds, when you are trying to come up with new applications, new projects, and you need help from administration, they need to have that trust in you. So keeping them in your loop is very, very important. Our current dean, which you see leadership changes down there, it's coming next. Our current dean is very digital forward. She is very modern library oriented, and I have benefited greatly from that. It's really advantageous. So I think I mentioned I've had 4 deans in 10 years here. They haven't all had the same forward thinking as my current dean does. So it's been a little more challenging over the years to get funding. Right now, I'm kind of in a really good area. I mean, I'm really happy with what's going on right now. But a lot of that has to do with ongoing conversations with your coordinator, your patrons, your partners, certainly your upper administration. Just keep those conversations alive. Be excited about what you do. Let them know about new collections that you've gotten in. They're raising funds as well. The deans are, or whoever, whatever institution you're at, you're always going to have somebody that's raising funds. They need to know what they can brag about. So they can shake those palms and say, hey, we just got this huge collection of 900 DAT tapes in. We don't have the ability to do it right now. We want to send that out for digitization. It's going to cost us X amount. What do you think about this? Do you think you might be able to help us with that? I recently put together a chart for our current dean about what it costs for us to actually digitize individual formats here in our digitization area. So she knows what to tell our donors. If they want to give us $35, they know that can be enough to digitize a cassette tape for preservation and create an access copy, right? So you have to assign the money, you have to assign the time, how much that time costs us to do it, how much the metadata costs to do it. I mean, all of that stuff is in that equation. And comparing it to sending things out for digitization is also important. They can see how much they're saving by us doing things in-house. And that's a big deal. We got a lot more money the last couple of months because they saw exactly how much they were saving by us doing things here in-house. So that was very helpful. All right, we're at the end. You can hear my voice long enough. Pardon for my voice, but I'm at the end of a pretty bad sinus infection. I don't know what this. So when you don't know what else to do something, right? You have to do something. The worst thing you can do is nothing, right? You might run into a bunch of brick walls. Nobody will fund anything. Your applications are not working. You can't get IT to work with you. Come up with something you can do. There's always a way. There's always a way to move forward. Like I said, there's desktop things you can download to help you get you where you need to be. And this is also where local rules apply. We always want to strive toward those highest standards nationally and internationally. But sometimes we have blockades in front of us that make it very difficult to do these things. And so just, look around, locally speaking, and create some of your own local rules, like what your resources are, and work the best you can with what you have. I've been in that position. It's not a fun position to be in. But as long as you keep looking for something, you'll find what you're looking for eventually. And, one of the biggest resources I've had in my 10 years of doing this work is my colleagues at other institutions. I'm not just talking about universities. I'm also talking about, private libraries, museums, anybody that has digital content that has a preservation program or is working towards that is going to be an advocate for it and is going to be happy to share with you what they're doing. I know it seems like we're in our office by ourselves, miles and miles away from anybody, any help. That's not really the case. I've had numerous people contact me over the years, and I'm always happy to help. And everybody I've ever contacted has been the same way. So we pay it forward, and don't be afraid to ask. Connect with colleagues at conferences. I know going to conferences the last 3 years has been a bit difficult, but fortunately, there's been a lot offered online, a lot of recorded things, just like this right here too, that people can use. Go back and look at those things. The dues that you pay to those organizations, they also give you access to recorded content online, and that is invaluable. So take advantage of that. And lastly, ask us. You don't know who else to ask, you can ask us, right? We're here to help, and we'll do the best we can. We'll try to understand your situation, and we'll try to give you some tools and give you some ideas. And if you want to contact me directly That's me. Email is probably easiest, but if you'd like to call, my life is complicated. I'm only in Boone 3 days a week. But I do get messages via email when somebody leaves an office message, so I'll get it. And if you need me, my mobile number is always available. I'm happy to help anytime I can.
Thank you, Matt. A virtual round of applause. That was wonderful. Um, does anybody have any questions for Matt? I can start with one. So Matt, like you mentioned, your department is like an offshoot of your library special collections.
Yes.
That's correct. Okay.
Yeah, when I first came here, my position was as an audiovisual archives and university records
Oh, okay.
person. So I got my start processing university archives and AV stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I was actually originally hired by the university archivist who ran
Oh,
the special collections and archives. And they also had a digital project manager on that team. So it was a very large team.
yeah.
It was pretty big.
Okay.
And so the digital project manager was tapped by a former dean to create a digital unit
Okay.
from our digitization and digital projects team and special collections.
Okay.
And that's how we became digital scholarship and initiatives.
Okay. That makes sense.
And the promise to that was to also take with us all of the digitization for special collections and university archives as well. And then also do campus outreach across campus to help with faculty projects, data visualization, all that. As
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Okay. That's
Now the team is, we have our coordinator, we have a digital projects librarian, we have an open access publishing person, we have a scholarly communications person, we have myself for digital preservation, we have my staff member who is a digitization specialist, and we have a systems analyst on our team as well, as I mentioned, and we have a team of student assistants, and that's our team.
okay. Do you work with then like archive staff like on like distributing some of the preservation work? Like do they like for like Born Digital content, for example, like do they do the processing of the collections and then it comes to you, or how do you handle that?
That's a really good question.
We're trying to figure that out locally, so I'm just,
Yeah, this actually has been one of the most difficult things to figure out.
yeah.
I to try to be careful here. Everybody doesn't understand how to properly handle digital content.
Yes.
My university archivist, who is also a wonderful colleague, she's a wonderful lady. She's also very knowledgeable, and I am trained as a digital archivist, and fortunately she understands that, and she trusts me to do a lot of things for them. I deliver their content to them for processing. That's the short answer. Okay. When there are gigantic collections, it's a little more complicated than that. Sometimes it has to be done piece by piece. But I'm the one who is the primary contact for the ingest of the original data.
Yeah.
And I'm the one that runs the virus checks and does the quarantines. And then when that's done, I will deliver a copy of those masters to whoever's doing the processing. And then I will look at their finished copy and I will mirror that in the masters as far as arrangement is concerned. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's the short answer. There's a lot that goes on in that. But yeah, when you split the teams like that, it does become a challenging thing to do. And my relationship with our university archivist is such that it's a very easy thing to work through.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to negotiate that here, and it's tough. Yeah, because it's like for us, like preservation is in a totally different department. But yeah, it's interesting to hear how the work is kind of distributed at other places.
Yeah, the level of flexibility that has to be left there is very high.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Felicia asked a question in the chat, and she said, "Great presentation. Is it possible to receive a copy of your digital preservation policy?"
The current one is on the shelf right now. It's
Oh,
we're in the middle of redoing it, and I'm working with a couple of people. When we get it done, I'll be in contact to share that with you guys.
okay.
I think the old one is pretty antiquated at this point. So I think the old one is actually on the Digital Power site, buried somewhere.
It
And
might.
they're welcome to look at that. I mean, it was new back then, I think.
Yeah.
It was unfinished back then, and we've since, I mean, need to redo it
Okay.
again. Because the digitization policy and the preservation policy used to be separate.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to attach those things to each other.
Oh, so you will be combining the two then?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And we have a long process for getting those things approved. It's
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Any other questions for Matt? And Jamie has to leave. Okay. Bye, Jamie.
Bye, James.
I,
I have a
I'm
question.
go ahead, Felicia.
I was about to say, I don't have a question, just a comment. I never, until you had a slide that says who we serve. I always just kind of considered the people that I serve, the people on our campus. So it was great to see that you had national and, just mention, I mean, I know people have national and international access to our collections, but I just never thought of myself as serving an international and national group until I saw it in writing. And I was like, yeah, that's major.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually get numerous requests for content from international places. There are professors offering classes in universities in Europe, Far East, and they're using our content. And it's because it's up there to be found. That goes back to the point of, if you're preserving it, but nobody knows you have it, then what good is it if it's never going to be used? There's lots of stuff that we preserve that its daily use is limited, right? It's not going to be needed very often. There's that part of it, but also, from a special collection standpoint, where you have a collection policy in the floor above us, where they want to collect and share content, that is on us to do that. My team, that's what we do. So we recently had a flood of requests from a bunch of people in Europe, and we couldn't figure out why it was happening all of a sudden. And apparently there was an online class being offered that all these people were taking about folk music. And I didn't know folk music was that big in Europe, but hey, and we provided, hundreds of files, audio and video for them to use in their class, So it's just great. It's just a really nice way to be able to show your content.
Yeah. Wow, what a cool unexpected use.
Yeah, it took us by surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find us? Yep. Yeah, I see the others had to drop off, so we're almost at the hour. So yeah, and that's really exciting to hear about your the Archivematica work that you're doing in Amazon, because I know other people have struggled with that.
Well, it's the problem is the cost
Yeah.
for using S3. I mean, when you put stuff in Glacier, you're not doing integrity checks because you got to pay to pull it out.
Yeah.
Now you can change percentages. You can pull something from one kind of storage to another. And that does change your month to month costs. So I could pull something over to check it.
Yeah.
But it's not an ideal situation for what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
And there's also the trust. I mean, we tend to trust Amazon for some reason.
Yeah.
I think it's because of all the mirroring and everything else. So you know, I do integrity checks on our own servers. I do a lot of the big curator stuff on our files, just running checks. But it can be challenging with the cloud storage.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm looking at probably a $5,000 difference in what I was originally quoted and what
Oh.
it's ended up being.
Oh, more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
because
surprised.
up front, they didn't even realize that, you know, some of the functionality depends on it being available storage,
Yeah.
not dark archive storage, you know.
Yep.
So that's just something they're going to need to work through. I think eventually they will.
Yeah, I think they're becoming more cognizant of this market from my understanding. Because I know like AP Trust has been trying to work with them, and there have been other I can't remember who else, but it seems like some of the other preservation storage providers have been trying to work with like not just having S3 as the storage, only storage option.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but you're right. Like if they don't offer the ability to do the fixed checking, it's kind of moot for a lot of people, or it makes
Yeah.
it tough.
Even,
Yeah.
yeah. The search functionality for the stuff for the SIPs that are already stored, you know, even the METS files are stored with the items,
Yeah.
with the content. So you can't even just download a METS file like that the way you're used to doing. So yeah, it's a little convoluted. I think it's probably not going to work out this time, but I think in maybe a year or two it might. We'll see.
Okay.
Who
Well,
knows?
I'll have to check in with you and see how that goes, because I'm curious. But
It's working beautifully from
Yeah.
a functional standpoint. It's fantastic,
yeah.
especially for large, big old AV collections. It's terrific.
Oh, like speed and bandwidth. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We had problems at my last employer. We were using Archivematica, and it just like everything you said rung true. Like all the local IT guys who would maintain it, and it would break, and it was slow. And yeah, we just had all the same problems. So if you can come up with a good model here, you'll be a hero to a lot of people.
Yeah, I sense some more tool testing in my future. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.